right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Peking University Law School. My name is Shen Dai. I teach at this very law school, and it's my great honor to welcome all of you to today's special and also highly anticipated event, where we will be exploring one of the most consequential topics of our time, artificial intelligence. Thinking about what it means for the future of our society, of our life, to democracy and good governance, and the possible roles that law may play in all of this. Now, our speaker today really needs no introduction, especially I think in this room, on this campus, but also I think as a general matter on this side of the world. That being said, I'll just go ahead doing some introduction so that everybody see I'm doing my job. Professor Lawrence Lessig is one of the world's foremost legal thinkers of our time. He is currently the Royal L. Furman Professor of Law and Leadership at Harvard Law School, and he previously taught at Stanford and Chicago. Professor Lessig is the founder of Equal Citizens and also a founding board member of Creative Commons, which is a highly influential organization on this side of the world as well. Professor Lessig is a member of the American Academy of Arts and Science and American Philosophical Society. He also has received numerous awards, including a Webby, the Free Software Foundation's Freedom Award, a Scientific American 50 Award, and Fast Case 50 Award. For the past 30 years, Professor Lessig's groundbreaking work has really shaped our thinking and our debates about technology, intellectual property, the architecture of the internet, and the fundamental challenges to democratic institutions. As a prolific writer and public thinker, Professor Lessig authored many worldly acclaimed books, such as Code and Other Laws of Cyberspace, Free Culture, Future of Ideas, Republic Lust, just to name a few. I'm sure everybody here is particularly familiar with his book Code 2.0 because it's been so influential here in China that it has actually two translations. I guess the reason is first, people weren't really happy with the first translation. Second, also most importantly, it's such an important, influential, and popular book, so that the very same translator thought they had to do it again 10 years after the first translation being done. And it's safe to say that as in the United States, here in China, Professor Lessig's ideas have really inspired lawyers, academics, policymakers, and beyond. Today, as artificial intelligence rapidly transforms the way we communicate with each other, the way we socialize with each other, the way we innovate as individuals and also as collectives, I think it could not be more timely for us to hear today about Professor Lessig's insights on this very topic, artificial intelligence and democracy. I think we all look very much forward to learning how he demonstrated for us today in the age of AI the apparently ever more complex interactions among the forces of the market, the norms, technology, and the law, and also the impact that will emerge or come out of all of these interactions on our shared future. Now, without further ado, please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Professor Lawrence Lessig.
So I'm so grateful for the chance to visit Peking University and to visit old friends in Beijing. And I'm very committed to the idea that especially now, as craziness reigns in my own country, it's incredibly important that we build the tightest friendships and connections between our two cultures, to spread and thicken the understanding and hope for long-term peace between our two cultures. And so to that end, I come here as a critic of my own country, but a country I deeply love. And I want to sell you on the ideals that we don't yet live up to. So it's clear, foundational, that here I don't need to talk about what I did 25 years ago when I published this book, Code, and then 7 years later, version 2, because yes, there are 2 translations of this book, and so I've spoken to many from China who have embraced the understanding, at least for the purpose of critique. But this book had been sloganified, that's a word that I can create, GPT created it for me, and the idea of the book has been summarized as code is law. Or I was given a new logo by GPT for this theory, code is law. But the point of the book actually was not to talk about code. It was to talk about the idea of regulation generally. It asked first what things regulate. Seems like we have some feedback on the...
Work well, if there's some.
So the first question, what things regulate, introduced the framework that I described as the life of the pathetic red dot. So the red dot is regulated by law, a law like do not speed when driving your car, which is an ex-ante rule enforced by the state. The red dot is regulated by norms, like you're invited to a party and formal dress is required. That's an ex-ante rule enforced by the community. And then the pathetic red dot is regulated by the market. Conditions like, we'll pay you just $15 an hour, which is a kind of simultaneous constraint enforced by property law and contract. And then fourth and most significant in the context of the internet, the pathetic red dot is regulated by the architecture, the found environment within which the dot lives. This is a simultaneous regulation, in some sense enforced by God, my favorite MIT t-shirt, 186,000 miles per second. It's not only a good idea, it's the law, the speed of light. So the point is, in all of these, we should be thinking of law as any structure created by humans to change how things otherwise would be. Or on one screen, think of law as any structure created by humans to change how things otherwise would be. And so in this picture, law is a structure created by humans to change how things otherwise would be. Norms are structures created by humans to change how things otherwise would be. The market is a structure created by humans to change how things otherwise would be. And architecture or code are structures created by humans to change how things otherwise would be. Code is law in this sense just simply means it will function as law. It will be a structure created by humans to change how things otherwise will be. And of course, in that sense, there's a long tradition in American legal thinking for recognizing how each of these norms, or each of these modalities, functions as law. So from the Yale School, Robert Ellickson's effort to get us to conceive of the way norms themselves function as a kind of law, Chicago School's understanding of the way economics functions as a kind of law, and the aspiration of all of us that law, at least in the United States, will someday function as law again. That's the conception, to see all of these as regulators, which begs the question, well then what regulates the regulators? And of course, as I thought of this in 1999, my conception was law regulated the regulators. So think of something I'm proud of in the United States, our efforts to regulate smoking, to reduce the amount of smoking, to reduce the incidence of smoking. There are plenty of laws in the United States that regulate smoking, like laws banning the ability of people to smoke indoors. And that, of course, reduces the incidence of smoking. There's also laws that are used to change the norms around smoking. Laws aim to spread messages that lead people to associate negative ideas with the notion of smoking, also designed to reduce the incidence of smoking. There are laws that regulate the market, taxes on cigarettes. Of course, we also subsidize tobacco production, but we tax cigarettes to raise the cost of cigarettes, so therefore reducing the incidence of smoking. And then there was a period of time where regulators conceived of regulating the cigarettes themselves, the character of the cigarettes. The FDA characterizing cigarettes as nicotine delivery devices and thereby aiming to regulate the quantity of nicotine in those devices by reducing the nicotine, thereby reducing the addictiveness of the cigarettes. So the point is that regulation is always a mix. The mix can change, the mix can be changed, and the incentive, I thought, in 1999 was that this original architecture of freedom that the internet was in 1999 would become an architecture of control. That those who controlled the infrastructure, both governments and business, would change that infrastructure to increase the capacity of the infrastructure to regulate and to control behavior. That point seemed obvious to me. I discovered it wasn't. The first time I presented this at a technology conference, a woman came up to me, a programmer, literally crying, telling me, I don't do politics. That's not my job. And when the book was reviewed by the New York Times, David Pogue wrote of the book, Lessig plays digital Cassandra. He predicts that the internet will become a monster that tracks our every move, but that nobody will heed his warning. He goes on, these discussions are thoughtful and measured, but the premise that frames them all is shaky. Lessig doesn't offer much proof that a Soviet-style loss of privacy and freedom is on the way. And unlike actual law, internet software has no capacity to punish. It doesn't affect people who aren't online, as only a tiny minority of the world population is. And if you don't like the internet system, you can always flip off the modem, which of course is true. You can flip off the modem. But the point is, then it wasn't clear that the internet would become as the internet plainly has become. Okay, 25 years since, this slogan has been used sometimes in a mistaken way. So some have taken this idea of code as law to imagine code is the regulator. And so understood, it's been attacked by some. I'll give you a really hilarious example of that here.
To sing the code is long, sound very out of tone, take you out of it. You ain't looking very much when you see the code is long. You rip hard out of the truth, looking for simplicity in the chaos and the mess, till you find yourself staring at the system gone wrong, and the depths to something. Change the code or the law. When you see the code is wrong. When you see the code is wrong. When you see the code is law.
He's really brilliant. And then sometimes it's misused, actually tragically misused. The crypto bros, slogan here, would be arguing to regulators that whatever the code allows is law, because code is law. So, for example, this famous original DAO, the DAO, which was an investor-directed venture capital firm, which about $150 million was invested in, a bug was discovered in the code for that platform, permitting about $60 million to be sucked from the investment platform by hackers who had found the bug and exploited it to steal the money. And in contexts like that, the question that these crypto bros would ask is, what is a bug, actually? I mean, a bug is just the code as it is. And so if code is law, then hacks must be lawful. It must be permitted for me to take advantage of the code as it is, to take the money out of the asset holding device. And indeed, people did this and tried to defend this. The Wall Street Journal writing here about a trader who said the code allowed him to withdraw millions from the crypto exchange, so therefore he was innocent. He invoked the idea that code is law, but of course, this is a crazy argument. Yes, of course, code is law, but not all law is legal, right? So if Florida passed a law that says Florida hereby seizes Disney World without compensation, you could say, yeah, that's law. They passed a law. But it's unconstitutional law because there's a higher law, namely the Constitution, that says you can't take property without compensation, so therefore that law would be defeated. And similarly, if you say the code let me take $100 million from your asset exchange and code is law, the response is, sure, code is law, but theft is illegal. So even if code is law, your behavior is regulated by the superior law of theft. So yes, code is law. It's not just the only law. Okay, now something I missed here, though, which is the critical point at the center of the argument I want to make about the relationship between AI and democracy, is that in fact, in America at least, we're not going to face a world where law is on top, but a world where market is on top. A world not where law is the king, but where market is the king, where a business model, the business model of the internet, sets the rules for these modalities of regulation, and that those rules are critically relevant to the question I want to talk about today with AI and democracy. Okay, so at the end of 2024, Sam Altman tweeted this: algorithmic feeds are the first at-scale misaligned AIs. So, algorithmic feeds, the news feeds on Facebook or Twitter or TikTok, first at-scale misaligned AIs, at scale meaning significant enough to matter to all of society, and misaligned AIs in the sense that what those news feeds did was not aligned with the values of a democratic society because those news feeds fundamentally misled whole segments of the American society to misunderstand the issues that were at stake, in Sam Altman's view, in the 2024 election. So I want to say two things about what Sam said. Number one, I want to say how right that is, how right he is in his description of algorithmic feeds. But number two, I want to say how wrong he is, or actually how screwed that means the United States is, given the character of the United States' democracy. So first, how right he is. In 2024, AI mattered in two ways. It mattered in the election through its intended effects and through byproduct effects. So the intended effects were of two characters. Number one, foreign actors sowing dissent in the United States, primarily Russia, who spread all sorts of false news through AI-driven sites and through bot farms that were driven to impersonate Americans about issues related to Ukraine. There was one extraordinary story that was just completely underreported. There's a concept called a news desert, which means a geographical area which has no local news because the local newspaper has gone bankrupt, because most local newspapers have gone bankrupt given the rise of the internet. What this study discovered was that in news deserts, the Russians had set up fake AI-driven newspapers that pretended to be Little Rock Times, like pretended to be local newspapers for these local sites. so that people would trip across these websites giving AI-generated Russian propaganda, and they wouldn't know that this is a Russian propaganda site. And what this study demonstrated was that there was a 50-50 chance for people within these districts that if they tripped upon a news site, it was a fake news site purporting to be real. That was an AI-driven effort to affect attitudes leading up to that election. And then secondly, there were domestic actors that were desperately trying to use AI to achieve their political ends. The most effective use of AI in the 2024 election was actually through fundraising, AI discovering radically interesting and new ways to flush money out of primarily Democratic donors. The president tried to use AI to claim that Taylor Swift had endorsed him. She was not happy about that use of AI. There were some congressmen who were using AI to just make their ads seem a little bit more interesting. Here's a favorite example of mine.
I have another dream. Yes, it is me, Martin Luther King. I came back from the dead to say something. As I was saying, I have another dream. That Anthony Hudson will be Michigan's 8th district's next congressman.
That didn't work for Anthony Hudson. Here's another example of a video ad that was on television. And it's a kind of bizarre image here. You have people protesting, holding these signs that say no gas stoves. And this was this alleged claim that Democrats were trying to get rid of gas stoves because gas stoves create a dangerous form of carbon within the homes. And so the claim here was that this candidate was one of the leaders in the anti-gas stove movement. Okay, but this image is completely artificially generated. There's no protest where people were holding signs like this. Yet that image was used in an ad to promote the candidacy of the person who opposed it. I've frozen this disclaimer at the bottom. Elements of this media have been digitally altered or artificially generated, but that appeared for about a half a second in the ad. So the ordinary person reading the ad would have no way to know that it was a false representation of that campaign. Okay, but adding all this together, if you said this is what AI in the 2024 elections was, at least the domestic part of it, I would say, as MIT said, that it's overblown to believe this had an effect on much. As the Times concluded, this wasn't the AI election year. Okay, but that was not AI's important effect. It wasn't the intended effects. It was AI's effect through the byproduct effects. And the byproduct effects of new media or social media. And here I build on the work of Tristan Harris, who was a Google engineer and then had some moments of conscious reflection on his life and purpose and decided to leave Google and start the Center for Humane Technology. He was at the center of one of the most successful documentaries in the history of documentaries, The Social Dilemma, talking about social media. But what he was doing at Google was focusing on the science of attention. The science aiming to engineer attention, to overcome resistance by people using the platforms to increase their engagement with the platforms. This is the strategy of all major social media platforms. As Tristan puts it, it's a kind of brain hacking. Understand brain hacking by maybe a more familiar idea of body hacking. This is a great book by Michael Moss, Salt, Sugar, Fat, which tells the story of the processed food industry in America. And the processed food industry are companies that develop massive laboratories to explore food science. It's a science to figure out how to engineer food, the mix of salt, sugar, and fat, that will make the food as addictive as it can be. Basically exploiting evolution, features about us that have evolved over tens of thousands of years, to overcome the natural resistance we otherwise would have to eating too much food so that we basically can't stop eating food. for the purpose to sell food, or you might say, quote, food, given how terrible this food actually is. Now, it turns out this is harmless for some people, but it's not harmless for other people. It's quite consequential for many who find themselves in habits of eating which are deeply unhealthy to them and to our society. That's what we could call body hacking, exploiting evolution for their profit and our loss. Brain hacking is the same with respect to attention. Exploiting evolution, the fact that we have irrational response to random rewards, where we can't overcome our consumption of bottomless pits of content, with the aim to increase engagement in order to sell ads. It's just a business model. We should call it the engagement business model. And recognize AI drives it. And that fact creates incentives. As Shoshana describes in her extraordinary book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, the incentives to know more about us, not just by watching us, but by poking us, tweaking, asking us questions, rendering us vulnerable, reaching down the brain stack to leverage our insecurity to reveal more so that they can sell ads better. Okay, the key here is that in so doing, this business model, imposes externalities on us. Imposes externalities on the world. As Zainab Tufekci puts it, the companies are in the business of monetizing attention, and not necessarily in ways that are conducive to health or success of social movements or the public sphere. Because it just turns out, too bad for us, that the best strategy, the most profitable strategy to drive engagement is a strategy that exploits the politics of hate. We engage more. The more extreme, the more polarizing, the more hate-filled the content is. AI learns that, and so that is what we are fed. Actually, this way of describing it is a little misleading. AI learns that. Stuart Russell, in his extraordinary book, reviews AI and social media almost dismissively, but as he puts it, the algorithms on social media aren't particularly intelligent, but they are in a position to affect the entire world because they directly influence billions of people. Typically, such algorithms are designed to maximize click-through. That is, the probability that the user clicks on presented items. The solution is simply to present items that the user likes to click on, right? Wrong. The solution is to change the user's preferences so that they become more predictable. Change the user's preferences. A more predictable user can be fed items that they are likely to click on, thereby generating more revenue. People with more extreme political views tend to be more predictable in which items they will click on. Possibly there's a category of articles that die-hard centrists are likely to click on, but it's not easy to imagine what this category consists of. So like any rational entity, the algorithm learns how to modify the state of its environment, in this case the user's mind, in order to maximize its reward. It's not simply discovering what we want, it's changing what we want so that we will be more predictable for it. And indeed, Max Fisher, in his book, The Chaos Machine, tracking the spread of political movements in the United States, Brazil, Germany, and Britain, finds, reviewing a wide range of academic work, that the spread of social media is related to the increased radicalization of the politics in each of these countries. Because the AI needs a more radical public to better serve its objective of maximizing engagement. In this sense, algorithmic feeds are the first at-scale misaligned AI. Okay. But the point is, it's not just about technology. It's an economy. This feeding is part of an economy. Renee DiResta, who was the head of the Internet Observatory at Stanford, in her really powerful book, Invisible Rulers, describes that economy as comprised of three components. Number one, the influencers, the people in the business of trying to get people to consume their content. Number two, the algorithms that are matching people to those influencers. And number three, the crowds that are actually consuming the content the influencers are making. And the point she offers is that this is an economy, these three influencing each other, together yielding something that nobody intended, but it just turns out maximizes wealth within that economy. These three together produce what she describes as bespoke realities. People living within realities that they themselves have constructed bespoke for themselves. So that their view of the world is a function of what they're being fed, and what they're being fed is a function of what the algorithm determines they want to be fed. And they increasingly believe these different views of the world. So rather than us all living within this one space, we live within many spaces. We live within a world where our world is not your world is not your neighbor's world, but you are being consumed by content that is giving you what you want. As Barack Obama puts it, when you watch Fox News, you're in one reality. When you read the New York Times, you're in a different reality. So take a very poignant, terrible example of this. If you think about the insurrection on January 6th, 2021, where thousands of Americans gathered in Washington and attempted to infiltrate the Capitol to force Congress to vote contrary to how the election had been decided and choose Donald Trump as president. The thing to remember about those people is that they believed something. They believed their election had been stolen. Now, I don't know what the appropriate response is if you believe your election had been stolen, but it's not implausible that the proper response is to go and steal it back. So the point is, if you actually believe this, then what happened here for many of these people was the rational, you could say patriotic thing to do. 70% of Republicans said they believed the election was stolen in January 2021. And you would say, well, that's just the uneducated Republicans. No, a majority of the college-educated Republicans said they believed the election had been stolen. Okay, so that's in 2021, 70% of Republicans means about 32% of America said they believed the election was stolen. That's not the scary graph. This is the scary graph. Since 2021, the number of people who believe the election has been stolen has not changed. Even though we live in an environment where we have more information than humans have ever had access to, even though there were scores of investigations trying to determine whether the election was stolen, and none of them, not one of them, pointed to evidence that would support even a suggestion that any errors led to a different result. Even though there's no evidence supporting this view, today still the same number of people assert they believe the election was stolen. I think we need to see why this is new. Richard Nixon, who was in 1972 elected in a landslide to be president of the United States, a really brilliant politician in many ways, came to China, radically changing the character of the United States relationship to China. In the first part of his administration, was loved by Republicans about as much as Donald Trump is. And then the blue line, the Democrats, he was not liked by Democrats, not as badly as Donald Trump is hated by Democrats, but, a majority at the beginning liked him, but, by the end of his first term, only about 40%. And then the middle lines are independents. who also, between the Republicans and the Democrats, liked him in the moderate space. But here's the striking thing about that graph. In the time leading up to his resignation, which had to happen when the public was convinced that he had conspired to cover up his participation in a burglary event at the Watergate office complex, his support collapses. And what's striking about that graph is it's collapsing at the same rate among all three groups. All three groups are all convinced that he is not what they thought he had been. And so when the support among Republicans crosses the 50% line, Republican senators came to the White House and said he needed to resign. This is not a picture of bespoke reality. This is a picture of common reality. Everybody's living in the same world. We're all watching the same 3 television networks. Those television networks are telling us the same story. That same story has a common effect. That is reality. Contrast that with this popularity of Donald Trump over the course of his first administration, where he was impeached twice. What's significant about these lines is they never change. Nothing changes them, among Democrats or among Republicans. Because each of these 3 groups is living within their own bespoke reality. News is being fed to them that confirms what they want to believe. If they're MAGA, they're fed news that convinces them that everybody's just out to destroy Donald Trump. The deep state's trying to get him. All of the allegations against him are false. They're all made up. And if the Democrats, they're fed lines of he is the most crooked, corrupt president in the history of the United States. But the point is, you're just getting what you want to believe. And that's constructing the bespoke realities. That is the new normal of American politics. And this has a consequence. This economy, this business model has a consequence. We the people become we the polarized, ignorant, and angry. Democracy is thereby weakened. Now my point is, this is the AI. This is the relevant AI that we should be focused upon. And recognize the harms are just a byproduct of a business model. The byproduct of a business model that's aiming not to destroy America by electing Donald Trump, or not to destroy Donald Trump by raising all sorts of conspiracies against him. The business model which is driving simply to maximize engagement with the social media platforms. Now it achieves its success not because AI is so strong, but because we are so weak. This is Tristan in the Social Dilemma.
All looking out for the moment when technology would overwhelm human strengths and intelligence. When is it going to cross the singularity, replace our jobs, be smarter than humans? But there's this much earlier moment when technology exceeds and overwhelms human weaknesses. This point being crossed is at the root of addiction, polarization, radicalization, outrageification, vanityification, the entire thing. This is overpowering human nature, and this is checkmate on humanity.
It's an incredibly important point. We're focused in computer science and in policy around AI on this moment which a significant portion of the AI research community believes we're going to achieve within the next 20 years. The moment of artificial general intelligence or superintelligence. And we focus on that moment because we ask the obvious, really important question, will we be able to control our AI then? Or will our AI control us? Or more consequentially, when you imagine a number of different political entities developing AIs that approach the AGI place, how will each of them defend themselves against the other? The arms race of AGI is the current political debate around AI. But Tristan's point is, we actually need to be worrying about AI much earlier. Not when it's capable of overcoming our strengths, but when it succeeds in overcoming our weaknesses. And his movie was focused on the individual human weaknesses, the individual's inability to put their phone down because the Twitter algorithm is so good at figuring out what to feed it to keep it addicted. The Instagram algorithm really good at making sure it never puts it down. But my point is, it's also when it overcomes our collective weaknesses, our democratic weakness, our inability democratically to come to an understanding of what in fact is true and make decisions on the basis of that. Instead, we fall into what we believe is true versus what they believe is true. And if you think about these intelligent machines which have their own purpose and think they might surround us individually or surround us collectively, we need to see that long before AGI, we already are seeing how these AIs overwhelm us. As AI gets what it wants, what it seeks, which is just our engagement, what it gives us is essentially democracy hacked. And as AI does this, and will do this better, as it divides us into these different bespoke realities, and our views about what government should do get expressed through public opinion polls that survey us and ask us, what should we do about the China threat? Or about the AI threat. And we report what we should do to these polls. The point is those polls create a not to be ignored public. You know, after January 6th, there were many Republicans on Capitol Hill who felt relieved because they thought that meant Donald Trump was over. That there was no way he was going to recover from January 6th. And then the overnight polls came back and told them that his base actually loved him more. So they were like trapped. What are we supposed to do? We're Republicans. Like, we're going to have to do what the people tell us to do, even though the people had been so fundamentally misled. This not to be ignored public will emerge, and it has emerged, and it will have a democratic effect, and that effect will change democracy. Now, as terrifying as that story is about 2024, the after 2024 story is even more terrifying. Asa Raskin, who started Center for Humane Technology with Tristan, his great sin was inventing the infinite scroll when working for a social media company, and then he felt so guilty he had to leave and go work for a company, a nonprofit aiming to save us from social media. He has this really powerful part of a lecture he gives, which describes an obvious strategy that I've been told by companies is actually happening today. So, you know, there are a lot of bots in the world that engage with humans as if they are humans. They're not faking anybody out, but they're just engaging with people. So the strategy is, imagine you are, deploying these bots for a platform like OnlyFans. You imagine like developing these AI-generated bots. And you target a certain demographic. Let's say you target 30-year-old men and younger. And you develop these bots, and the objective of these bots is to develop relationships with the target demographic. You know, and you don't need much of an imagination to imagine how, in fact, that happens, but the point is those relationships get to be quite intense over a period of a year, let's say. And so they begin to develop these relationships, engaging and befriending and learning about their targets, mapping the psychologies of their targets. And then comes the next election, and you imagine the people deploying these bots now deploying them to get the bots to do what they want them to do. So, I don't know if I can continue to hang out with you if you're actually going to vote for X, No, the point is, like, there's any number of ways that they could now be deployed to induce the target to behave in a particular way. And so you imagine literally tens of thousands, maybe millions of these bots out there directing as the deployer wants. There was this terrible xenophobic movie way long time ago called The Manchurian Candidate. But actually, we should think about the Manchurian bot armies, or maybe it's more like this, that get deployed. I'm not saying it has anything to do with Manchuria. It has more to do with MAGA, whatever. But the point is, deployed for this election-related purpose. And the critical point is, as Asa emphasizes, it's completely invisible. Nobody knows it's happening. And if you can imagine it, you know it is happening. You know right now it is being deployed. And I will report, once I gave a talk like this and I talked about this idea, and a guy came up to me and he said, I'm working at a company where we are doing that right now. Okay, so that's the sense in which Sam is right. Algorithmic feeds are the first at-scale misaligned AI. Okay, now, how is he wrong? Well, when you look at the sentence, the important word in that sentence is misaligned. In what sense are these AIs misaligned? Just before the 2020 election, Andrew Bosworth, who was the CTO at Facebook at the time, wrote a letter to the employees because they were very anxious about that election because many of them thought that Facebook had elected Donald Trump in 2016, and they were worried this platform would once again produce that same result. And in this memo, Bosworth invoked the story from Salt, Sugar, Fat. And the story he invoked is that this book describes how the processed food industry, when it realized that it was producing food that was basically poisoning its customers, began to wonder, could we make our food more healthy? Could we produce healthy processed food that wouldn't poison our customers? So Bosworth writes in his letter, what I expect is that people will find that algorithms are primarily exposing the desires of humanity itself for better or for worse. This is a salt or sugar, salt, fat problem. It's not the title, but it's close enough. The book of that name tells a story of ostensibly about food, but in reality about the limited effectiveness of corporate paternalism. A while ago, Kraft Foods had a leader who tried to reduce the sugar they sold in the interest of consumer health, but consumers wanted sugar. So instead, he ended up reducing Kraft's market share. Health outcomes didn't improve. That CEO lost his job. The new CEO introduced quadruple stuffed Oreos and the company returned to grace. Giving people tools to make their own decisions is good, but trying to force decisions upon them rarely works for them or for you. Remember, he's talking to the employees at Facebook. He goes on, at the end of the day, we are forced to ask what responsibility individuals have for themselves. Set aside substances that directly alter our neurochemistry unnaturally. Make costs and trade-offs as transparent as possible. But beyond that, each of us must take responsibility for ourselves. If I want to eat sugar and die an early death, it is a valid position. My grandfather took such a stance towards bacon, and I admired him for it. His social media is likely much less fatal than bacon. Now, first of all, I want to ask, really? Bacon? I think bacon has not done as much harm in my family as social media has, but we can put that aside. The point that he is making is it's not a Facebook problem, even if Facebook is a democracy problem. Now, why is that? Well, it's because Facebook is a corporation. What is a corporation? Well, as David Runciman describes in his really great book, we should actually think of corporations as a kind of AI. Indeed, if you think about AI with some perspective, AI is talking about intelligence. It's distinguishing between artificial and natural intelligence. We humans kind of think of ourselves as kings of the natural intelligence order. Artificial intelligence is the intelligence we make. Runciman's point is, we have already made artificial intelligence, and for a very long time now. Not digital AI, but what we could call analog AI. So these are entities or institutions that have a purpose, that act in the world instrumentally to advance that purpose. Call that analog AI. They are instrumentally rational to that end. So from this perspective, the state is an analog AI. It has institutions, elections, parliaments, constitutions, for the purpose of some collective end. Here's the preamble to the American Constitution to promote the general welfare. So the state is an analog artificial intelligence devoted to a common good, we at least can hope. And so too is a corporation, an analog AI. It has institutions, boards, management, finance departments, for the purpose of making money, at least as it's viewed today, because Milton Friedman in the 1970s gave us the conception the only corporate social responsibility a company has is to maximize its profits. That view is modern and absurd. Historically, corporations have lots of purposes beyond maximizing profits. But it is what it is. That's what it is today in America, at least. A corporation is an analog artificial intelligence devoted to maximizing profits or maximizing shareholder value. These are AIs. They have purposes and objectives. Sometimes they complement each other. So a school bus company has a complementing purpose to a school board. Each is happy the other exists. Sometimes they compete with each other. So a park has a competing purpose to a coal-fired power plant located next to it. They conflict. And when they conflict, we like to tell ourselves a kind of happy story. Once upon a time, there was a park located next to a power plant. And the power plant was polluting the park. And so a democratic referendum came together and they said, we should clean up the power plant's smog. And they voted and they passed a regulation banning smog from the power plant. And that was it. The smog disappeared. AI's competing and the democracy AI winning. It's a happy story. It's also a fantasy. Because in America, at least, the corporations are the more effective AI. Indeed, if you think about these together, you can think humans are the first kind of intelligence here. We are instrumentally rational. I think we're the first instrumentally rational entities we're going to talk about here. We're more instrumentally rational than cows, maybe not as instrumentally rational as ants, but the point is, the point is that we have capacity to doing what we want to do in the natural world. That's natural intelligence. But then we build artificial intelligences. So the state or democracy is an artificial intelligence that we've built. And then the state enables people to build another artificial intelligence, corporations. And each of these layers aspires to control the layer above it. So humans through elections aim to control democracy. And democracy through regulation aims to control the corporation. But the reality of control is very different. Corporations in America at least control the democracy through extraordinary spending and super PACs and the like. And the democracy actually controls the people who are supposed to control it through corrupted systems of representation like gerrymandered districts or suppressed voting structures. Okay, so then if you think about what the godfather of AI, Geoffrey Hinton, says about intelligence, he tells us there are very few examples of a more intelligent thing being controlled by a less intelligent thing. We could say there are very few examples of a more instrumentally rational thing being controlled by a less instrumentally rational thing. What we can see in this story is that these analog AIs, though aspired to be controlled by the layer below, actually controls from the top down. And then on top of this, we can add digital AI. And here too, you have an aspiration to control, corporations trying to control their AIs. But here too, you have a reality of control. In September 2017, Facebook was embarrassed when ProPublica published this article describing that ProPublica had discovered that on Facebook's ad platform, you could buy a category of audience called Jew haters. You could say, I want to target my message to Jew haters. Now, the reason Facebook was embarrassed was that there was no human at Facebook who ever created the category Jew haters. That category had been created by their AI. They'd created an AI to discover the kind of categories that would maximize ad revenue, and the category, looking at the diverse group of people using Facebook, discovered there were a bunch of Jew haters on Facebook. So they said, this is a good idea. We're going to create a category called Jew haters, and we'll sell to that category. So the point is, the company thought it was controlling its AI. The AI was controlling the company. So corporations are this more effective analog AI. Now, why is that? Well, in December 2021, Joe Biden convened the Summit for Democracy, but just before the Summit for Democracy, Renmin University Institute released a really powerful paper describing the flaws in American democracy. And that paper described the American democracy as suffering from a condition called vetocracy. And then a news agency here in China created this really great graphic. So take democracy, just change two words, and you go from democracy to vetocracy. Now, the word vetocracy was actually created by Francis Fukuyama, an American political scientist, in his latest really fantastic book, Political Order and Political Decay. And what vetocracy is imagining is a system where there's a power vested in very few, typically the wealthy, to basically block the ability of government to make meaningful change. In America, the root of that power is the way we fund elections, the corrupting influence of money in elections, but it's not just, it's just mainly that. So this criticism, I believe, of America as suffering as a vetocracy is spot on as a diagnosis of the United States government, and it's because these corporations are more effective AIs in achieving their objectives when their objectives conflict with the objectives of democracy. But the real thing to think about in the difference among these four layers is that this layer is going to be massively more instrumentally rational than the other layers before it, which is why some kind of imagine this as bringing the end of time. But the point is that difference points to the potential for how significant AI will be as it begins to interact with society. And so if you think of Facebook as an analog AI, or now Meta as an AI, with an objective function, maximizing along that objective function, that's why this statement is not true. It's misaligned socially. Algorithmic fiends are misaligned democratically. But they are corporately perfectly aligned. They are aligned with the engagement business model. They are privately beneficial, even if publicly not. They're privately profitable, even if publicly democracy destroyed. Now, when you think about it like that, this is what just drives me crazy. It is just a business model. It is just a way for a bunch of investors to make money. And the question we should ask about every business model is, are the benefits worth the cost? And the cost here are the cost to democracy itself. So if you told me the only way to end global warming was to end democracy, I wouldn't agree with you, but I would understand what you were saying. The cost and the benefits are comparable. Or if you told me the only way to end world hunger was to end democracy, again, I wouldn't agree with you, but I would understand the argument. It would make sense as an argument. The costs are related to the benefits. But when you tell me you have to weaken or end democracy so Mark can get richer, I just don't understand what you're saying. I don't understand how this is even an utterable statement. So to say that these are the first at-scale misaligned AIs is just not true. They are at-scale aligned AIs that point to the deep problem American democracy faces as we imagine them serving the deployers, the corporations, and the corporations serving their interests over the interests of the democracy. Okay, what is to be done about this? How could you fix this? Well, court decisions have said the only way to fix something like this in America is that you would need a new law. Could there be a new law? I asked ChatGPT to give me its view of what the United States Congress looks like. That was what it produced for me. But forget like this clown conception of Congress. Just point to China's description of the vetocracy to answer the question, could there be a new law? No, there could not be a new law. It would be vetoed by the structures of power that exist within the democracy today. And even if there were a new law, could there be a new law given the way our First Amendment is interpreted? And for most of the regulations people are talking about, only if we adopted a different conception of the First Amendment, which I describe in a paper called The First Amendment Does Not Protect Replicants, but the point is, under current views of the First Amendment, probably can't be a law. But if we ask what should be done right now, what should be our immediate aim, I think our immediate aim should be to find ways to blow up the engagement business model. So one strategy would be, imagine Congress passed a quadratic engagement tax. So a tax that said the more you engage, the higher the tax is, and the tax will go up the square of the unit of engagement. So I don't know what the numbers should be, but the point is 1 unit, the tax is 1, 2 units, the tax is 4, 3 units, the tax is 9. And at some point, the tax would be so high that the platform would say, hey, Lessig, go take a walk. Please don't spend any more time on my platform because you're costing me too much. And if that tax were in deployment, that would change the business models of these platforms immediately. They would have to find a new way to make money because the taxes would be too expensive for them to make it in the old way. Or politically, strategy 2 in the United States right now, at least, is to focus on kids, because this is the one thing Republicans and Democrats all agree about. This technology is having a devastating effect on our kids. And even if you think about TikTok versus Douyin, the deployment of TikTok in America is not the deployment of its equivalent here. Its equivalent here is a much tamer, happier platform than the thing my children consume. And that's because it's regulated here. And it's not regulated in my country. And I can tell you, most American parents would look at what you're doing and say, God bless you. Please give us your regulation. Because we are increasingly recognizing the tragic consequence that these technologies are having for the capacity of our children to live in the world. Okay, but the longer term, there's an important fight that we should begin to have right now, recognizing we should fight the business model before it's the business model. The problem with fighting the business model of social media is that it already is a massively powerful industry. If we had fought the business model before it became a massively powerful industry, maybe we could have succeeded. So that drives the question, what is AI's business model? And the particular question I'm focused on these days is, will it essay to sell the truth? So this morning I asked GPT, I said, does GPT auction results? Meaning, can an advertiser pay you for priority in any answer you give? And GPT said to me, no, ChatGPT is not auction results, and advertisers cannot pay for priority. This means no one can pay to appear in answers. I don't promote brands, products, or viewpoints because of compensation. If I mention something commercial, e.g. a product, a service, a book, it's based solely on relevance or popularity, not based because of advertising. So then I said, would there be a business interest in ChatGPT changing that policy? Could it be financially beneficial to them? And ChatGPT honestly responded, yes, from a purely financial perspective, there could be a strong business incentive for OpenAI to change that policy and allow some form of sponsored placement or answer prioritization, but doing so would raise serious ethical, reputational, and user trust issues. Why it could be beneficial? Search advertising is hugely profitable, high commercial intent queries, monopoly rents from the control of attention. But here's the counterpoint. Why OpenAI has not done this? Trust is fragile, regulatory and legal risk, internal alignment values, strategic differentiation. But notice the deep honesty in this answer. Why OpenAI hasn't done this yet? Conclusion, as of today, there's a clear financial upside in auctioning or selling answer priority. but doing so would compromise user trust for a while. Invite regulatory scrutiny as if there is regulatory scrutiny, and contradict OpenAI's current public commitments, which can always be changed. It's possible that some future version of this model might present clearly labeled sponsored content or not labeled sponsored content, but as of now, no such system is in place. Okay, but this suggests there's a simple rule here. At least this we should imagine the government being able to pass, which is disclosure if you are selling the truth, if you are giving us answers based on what you've been told to say, based on who's paid you to say it. But even that regulation is unlikely in the United States. Okay, but more fundamentally, what is to be done? I don't know if this movie is available in China or if you've seen it, this movie, which tells this really terrifying story of these aliens that invade. And these aliens have a particular disability, which is that they can't see, but they can hear. And so whenever they hear what they believe is a carbon-based life form, they attack it and they consume it. And so humans learn to live life never making a sound. They have to be completely silent, because if they're not completely silent, they will be consumed. And in this tragic scene, this kid plays with a airplane that makes this terrible sound, and then the father is racing to get the kid before, well, it's a bad ending. But the point is, this is a new life forced on them by an AI. The metaphor is pretty obvious, right? It's the same for us. And AI has invaded us too. Not an alien intelligence, but an artificial intelligence. And when a flood is coming, what you should do is move to higher ground, to protected ground, protected from the effect of that AI, to insulate democracy or shelter democracy from AI's force, from AI's harmful force. It's a really great book by David von Raybroek, published about a decade ago, called Against Elections. But he begins the book by saying, for almost 3,000 years, people have been experimenting with democracy, and only in the last 200 have they practiced it exclusively by holding elections. Suggesting that there are a lot of other ways to run democracy-like systems that don't rely on elections, recognizing elections are the most vulnerable, hackable, distortable, destructible elements in the chain of democratic authority. Now, this fact about democracy is changing. And not by arguing against elections, but by complementing elections with other forms of representation, like, for example, citizen assemblies. The citizen assembly movement is a movement to convene random, representative, informed bodies of citizens who deliberate on some issue after they've been given the information about that issue. This, in this sense, is a kind of protected democracy. They've been put in a context where the effects of these AIs can be neutralized. Iceland used a system like this to convene what became a process to craft a crowdsourced constitution, which, when ratified by more than 2/3 of the voters in an election, should have become the basis for the new constitution. The parliament ignored it, but still, the point is the citizens created it. Ireland regularly convenes every year these citizen assemblies to address really important issues that the nation faces, and indeed they convened an assembly which concluded they should deregulate abortion and they should support same-sex marriage, two conclusions that the Irish Parliament would never have concluded because the Irish Parliament is so deeply connected to the Catholic Church. And when they sent those conclusions out to referenda, they were passed with higher proportions than even the Citizen Assembly had supported them. France now regularly convenes these conventions, the first to address climate change, second on end of life. Presidential candidates now running for president run based on which convention they will convene, what citizen assembly they will convene to discuss whatever issue they think of as important. There are thousands of these now spreading up across the world. None of them are perfect, but all of them are extraordinarily hopeful. Indeed, I would say it's the only magic in the democracy space right now. And you could say, or let's maybe say, but the point is it's not just a good idea. We should see it as existential for democracy. Complementing democracy with citizen assemblies is not just a cool new experiment. It's the only long-term way to make sure democracy can survive. Because there is no way to beat this engagement business model now, this business model against democracy. So we have to find a way to move beyond it, kind of dramatic now way, to recover a belief in us, the belief that our views should matter. Because this is the scariest graph about democracy right now. So Pew since 1997 has been asking the question whether Americans have trust and confidence in the wisdom of American people making political decisions. So this is asking whether we trust ourselves. And in 1997, 2/3 of Americans said they did trust us, and 1/3 said they didn't trust us. And since 1997, those numbers have inverted. 2/3 of us now say, we don't trust us, because we've seen just how crazy we can be. And only 1/3 of us say, yeah, we trust us. But my point is, if you live in a democracy where the people don't even trust the democracy, it's not a democracy anymore. It can't survive as a form of government. And if we don't find a way to move to a place where we can have trust in democracy, then we will have not found a way to survive given the emergence of these technologies. Thanks very much.
All right. Thank you so much, Professor Lessig. That was really a feat. I think, I guess I was telling him actually for a lot of us here, we actually have stories about first time listening to Professor Lessig's doing presentation. For me, that was at 2014 in Chicago. For somebody else, it was in Hong Kong and New Haven. But I guess for a lot of people here, that was their first time in this room. So I'm really happy last year at the law school, we invested in this large screen. The technology actually matters. It's a good investment. And also I think, thank you for sharing with us all this, really profound and important insights. I think, at least for me, several things, really, came up.
Sure. Thank you. So I think first, it's a great, lesson for a lot of us here just to recall and remember, what code is law, the slogan actually means. I think I totally agree actually based on my experience speaking to people, indeed, there's a lot of misunderstandings. A lot of people actually understood this to be, technology is everything. Technology is actually what, controls where the normative command comes from. So basically there's a lot of mixture, or mixed up of the descriptive statement with a normative, statement, right? So obviously law is way more than a descriptive, mechanism to say, okay, so this happens, what causes what else. The law, has a lot of, element of human aspiration and values, right? So which shouldn't mix. So this is actually a great lesson. But also this, people, misunderstood this also because, I think exactly because of the lack of attention to the actual book, right? So it's actually, I think, social media is one thing to blame for this misunderstanding. You want to have a very, short, and, memorable, slogan, which, is misunderstood. So the second, I think, what's really interesting, to a lot of us here who are, familiar with the work, especially with the model of, multiple, modalities of regulation. I think, it's very interesting to see, Professor Lessig actually demonstrate basically now we do have this, turn, where the market is actually getting on top and then, basically becoming the most important modality that's, regulating all these other regulators indirectly, so they have this indirect, impact of control. But also, I guess, for people who still remember what's being said in code, so this prediction was actually there as well, right? So basically, there was this competition between the West Coast and East, West Side code and with the East Side code, right? So we do have this fight between political forces that try to regulate people versus the technological or business interest code that try to regulate people as well. And then it's very important to see where the law stands. And then also, I think it's very interesting to, I guess, for a lot of people to see how Professor Lessig actually present the rise of artificial intelligence along actually a historical timeline, right? So basically the challenges artificial intelligence now poses to us, to the democratic institutions of the society, I think it may be understood along the same logic of past events, right? So basically where the humans create artificial beings for the sake of so that they could serve human purposes. But eventually, at the same time, we do run the risks of having, or the risk of losing control of these artificial beings, so they come back to control us, especially, when they become so effective in, exploiting our own weakness. I guess for the Marxist, in the audience, and I bet that there are a lot, right? So here's China. So, this, story, of reification, I guess, shouldn't be unfamiliar for a lot of you, right? So we talk about all of these kind of things, which, we, produce, this, human relations, but then it becomes, harms back us. I guess for AI, the problem of reification, is challenging. Also, it's hard for a lot of people because I guess people are still struggling with the optimistic prospect and the pessimistic prospect, right? So a lot of people are still thinking, I guess, especially for the optimists, the take is, there are a lot of risks, but maybe we still have to take the risk because, it might not necessarily just be to make the, business richer. There might actually be some prospect of this technology being helpful to break up, some of the old chains, the chains of old control and bringing new possibilities of, human emancipation, right? At least that's the pessimist, that's the optimistic Marxist take, right? But it's just that we will have to try every way to fend off a potential AI overlord, for example, from arising. But then obviously we do have this very pessimistic take, which is, probably where we can really outmaneuver somebody something that is superior to us in terms of instrumental effectiveness. So that's a really profound a question that I think we should all ask ourselves, which is, is there still any hope? Is there still anything that we can do to save us from something that seems to be already in motion? I think Professor Lessig point to some options, especially one potential alternative to electoral democracy. I think that's also one of the topics that here in China for many years we've been discussing, which is what democracy means in more broader terms, especially than electocracy. Is there any alternative to electocracy? I think especially with the rise of AI, this is more important. Does AI actually give us some further alternative, or AI actually eliminate some of the terms that we used to have? So with all these questions in mind, I am very glad that today we also have the honor to have invited two terrific discussants to participate in the conversation with Professor Lessig. The first discussant I want to invite Professor Linghan Zhang, who is Professor of Law at China University of Political Science and Law. Professor Zhang works on law and technology and also focuses on AI governance. She is a leading voice on global AI governance conversations, collaborations. She currently serves as an expert member on the United Nations High-Level Advisory Body on Artificial Intelligence. So let's welcome Professor Zhang.
Thank you, Professor Lessig. Hello, everyone. It's good to have me here. So I'm sure that everyone here, just like me, has enjoyed revisiting this classic and gaining insights into the Professor Lessig's latest research developments. So my own journey started international law, started 15 years ago when I started my doctoral dissertation, and Professor Lessig's books and articles give me a lot of influence and inspired me a lot. So I really want to, say my appreciation to you. And I think everyone gained a lot of insights from Professor Lessig's concise, clear, and yet very profound speech. It reminds me, I want to share a little survey results with all you here. That last year, our UN high-level advisory body, we did a survey online, and we invited 300 experts from 80 countries to ask them to rank all the risks they think is the highest generated by the AI. And here we got the results. That is the first risks, like high cross multiple domains at once, is the damage to information integrity, which means disinformation and misinformation. And the second risk is the intentional use of AI in armed conflict by state actors. And third one is the inequality caused by AI because of the technology and the wealth concentration. So it reminds me of this result because Professor Lessig first he mentioned why AI diminished the democracy, and after your speech, I think it's kind of the democracy's problem. Maybe it's not totally AI's fault. I think AI just precisely strikes the weakness of a democracy. For example, you mentioned that the democracy based on if we think the so-called democracy is a vote-democracy, so the democracy based on the humans' intentions and their wills, which the algorithm just precisely strikes the humans' freedom of will. And it strikes the human's weakness. And second is the elections, because now we are in the era of post-truth. People can hardly get the real truth from the internet, from the social media. So when people think they just voted to maybe the party they really trust and want to rely on, but actually they cannot provide this kind of a guarantee to people. So this is the weakness of election. And the second is the corporations. Professor Lessig also mentioned the corporations impose their wills to the democracy and have some great influence to the election and to the human through like lobbyists or some other mechanisms. Actually, I think we can see either it's a military industrial complex or it's a giant tech or industrial complex. It also will great influences on the election through the vote-democracy. So I think if we are so pessimistic to the democracy, maybe yet I think AI is a promising power that can promote humans' welfare. But maybe the weakness is from democracy, maybe not from AI. Second, I really love your idea of analog AI, because you just notice that I reveal that AI is kind of a social production organization form, that it can organize different labors and materials and resources and to invest them and organize them to do the social production. And I also want to share some of my thoughts after your inspiration. I noticed that there are nuances between the different terms of AI. When we talk about AI, less than 5 or 7 years, I participated in legislative work in China. And before we do that, actually we collected all the AI conceptions from different guidelines and laws and regulations. There are more than 6 kinds of AI conceptions. So the connotation of AI is quite vague and mixed. you can put everything into it. So before we talk about how we regulate AI and how we react to the AI change our world, maybe we can first to figure out what is AI, what we are actually talking about when we talk about AI governance. I really appreciate Professor Lessig mentioned knock-like AI, because I think AI is more than technology or applications. Actually, I think in the connotation of AI, there are several dimensions. First is, of course, AI is a cutting-edge technology. When we talk about AI in this dimension, we are talking about, when we talk about the governance of AI, we are talking about how to prevent AI, to lose control, and how we can prevent AI from violate the ethic of science. Actually, in all the laws, the current laws in China, of course, when we talk about the governance of AI, actually we are talking about applications and services. If the platform provides some services to the society, it is in the scope of a law regulation. If it is not, actually in current AI law in China, not in current AI regulation in China, if you don't provide services to the public, you are not in the scope of AI regulation. So most of the laws all over the world, when we're talking about governance AI, we're talking about applications and services. But beyond that, I think the third and the fourth dimensions of AI are most important. The third is AI actually is infrastructure. And actually, I think Professor Lessig first bring the concept to the table is architecture. And especially in nowadays, I found that AI is more and more embed more values into infrastructures. It is initiated designed to, express their political values and how they, value different benefits. But I really like to introduce the fourth dimension, which I think is the most important, and also is an echo with Professor Lessig. You mean the business model of internet? I think it is a perspective of social production organization mode. I think it's similar to your idea that the business model of internet. So from this perspective, we can imagine that Marx and Mumford, they mentioned a concept of a giant machine, which means integrates social resources such as labor, knowledge, capital, energy in a systematic and a large-scale way. So I think Professor Lessig's business model for internet actually is in this means to explain how AI change our world and how AI change how we interact with the labors and the resources. So back to the risk survey I just mentioned at the beginning. Actually, I did the same survey in China as well after we got the results. But we found that the Chinese people are most concerned about three things. First is disinformation and misinformation. It's quite similar with the whole scale of the investigation. And the second, Chinese people really care about whether AI can make money for me, whether I can, use AI to promote my efficiency. And the third is whether AI can provide a high-quality company to me, whether AI can talk to me, can comfort me, and to give me some, comfort. So why Chinese people are not concerned about inequality caused by AI? Maybe I don't want to drag our discussion into politics, but I think maybe that in China we have different laws, we have different political systems. So in the Eastern, the Chinese people and the Western citizens worry about the risks such as AI misuse, misinformation, and disinformation is similar. But the attitude towards AI development and the applications vary greatly. Like you just mentioned, the AGI. When I talk to some Western academics, I think they are all concerned about AGI. Some scientists told me, why I don't know people want to, invent AGI. I think they are just predators. I don't understand that attitude, but in China, in China, we all maybe sit here. Majority of us think that AI promote our welfare and AI will promote the social development, and we are looking for that. So I think it's the problem of political systems. Maybe in China we are so optimistic because we are not have so many weaknesses when we're facing AI's development. So also I think the political systems dedicates that private companies like big techs cannot amass excessive power, upon the government. The government focus on both promoting AI industry and regulating it effectively. And for now, I think it's quite effectively. So that's why we are not so concerned about AI's destructive effect to the democracy and to the political system. I really like the ideas you bring to the table, like block the meaningful, you mean the AI, and maybe block the meaningful changes. So how we resist the change AI bring to us? Professor Lessig mentioned the tax and how we to protect our keys. I think if we want to resolve this problem fundamentally, maybe this method is good, but maybe not good enough. Essentially it's a problem of power. How we balance the power between the technology and the power of people. So I will stop here only by adopting, but I think Professor Lessig tell us only by adopting a broader macro level perspective to study the transformation of social power structures can we ultimately achieve truly meaningful research. Thank you so much.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Professor Zhang. So these are definitely great points for discussion, I guess, later. So one, what is actually the bigger problem? Is AI or democracy? What kind of problem runs deeper, right? Second, I guess the brilliant point, which is about the potential cultural differences. When it comes to imagination, what AI does, what kind of, challenges, risks AI poses, right? Obviously, there are common risks, misinformation, everybody hates it, but then, it seems that, there are less apocalyptic, imagination of AI on this side of the world than obviously in the West. So, what did that tell us? So, with that, let's, go to the second, discussion. For that, we would like to invite Professor Lin Hu, who is our colleague at this law school. Professor Hu is one of the earliest Chinese cyber law theorists, and he is also widely regarded as one of the most original scholars on law and technology here in China. His work is known to explore very novel legal issues arising from the internet and other technologies through a unique lens of political economy. Now, please welcome Professor Hu.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here and to share with you some of my thoughts on Professor Lessig's remarkable speech. And I think, I used to, in my previous studies, I used to actually go somehow deeply into your theory, like the code theory or architecture theory. I think based on the experience of the United States and China, I think I totally agree with you that the AI is just part of the internet and just part of its regionally, maybe we can trace back into the regional design of the internet, and then it could be hijacked by the business model, right? And I used to define such business model as mode of production, right? The mode of production of information, contents, goods, services, and all kinds of resources, particularly economic resources, that could be helpful for society, but could also be more helpful to the corporates. I think that in my previous study, I just think that if we try to define the internet as a kind of mode of production, then how to deal with that, right? It could get benefit for the society, but it also could bring more controls, more power for both government and the corporations. This is what that a term called cybernetics means, right? The internet has perfectly fit into that cybernetics design. I think that maybe when we just see all over the world, maybe different jurisdictions could provide different answers. Maybe like maybe EU could be maybe some extreme point that it impose very strict laws over the internet. Of course, maybe some of the reasons could be that it hasn't it do not has its own big corporations within the EU, so that perhaps due to the strict laws. But maybe in both the United States and China, we see the huge corporations. But there still could be some differences. Like in China, where we see that the government's power is still more powerful than the corporate, so that we see some new kind of governing structure, like I used to use a term in my previous study, like outsourcing power, meaning that the central government could have some deal with the corporations, so that unless the corporations should follow the bottom line laws, then maybe above the bottom line, then maybe there is a huge space for the corporations to exercise its own jurisdiction. So I think it's very interesting to see how the AI could be embedded into this changing way of the internet. So I think the key point Professor Lessig's lecture proposes that the AI could be exaggerate maybe the bad or the harms of the internet, but we might have to find out some ways to figure out to fix this. So I totally agree that and I think your proposals in the last is very interesting. But here I wish to propose a deeper question that whether can we fight against a mode of production, or we just we try to fix that mode of production and try to make good use of it, right? So I think the first solution I wish to propose is that we use magic to defeat magic, right? Yesterday, in my talk in this class, I proposed that maybe the algorithm or AI could be used to help individuals to block or to just help filter those information, so those news they dislike, or they just quite harmful. As you said, maybe the kids or children could be protected by their parents using those kind of algorithm. Otherwise, all those kind of there are too much information, right? So maybe the algorithm could help us to do this. But my first question for you is that why is such maybe broadly saying that why the democratic AI haven't been invented yet? Why would be that outcome? Previously, I remember around the year 2000, there is some academic article saying that when you said the code is law, then it's no problem. It seems that the controllable code is everywhere, but I remember there is some articles saying that what if the market is still effective? Then maybe someone could invent some other kind of code, right? You may have your bad code, but maybe someone could invent some good codes. So how would that market could be exist? Of course, nowadays we see that that kind of market haven't been invented yet because it seems that the business model has been universal and everybody, especially China just follows, sometimes just follow the business model of the Silicon Valley. So my first question is why such a kind of pro-democratic AI haven't been invented? And okay, if that solution cannot be take effect, maybe we can go next into the second solution. We use the government power to defeat the magic, right? So I still wish to use the Chinese example. You know, the Chinese Communist Party is so powerful so that it can control the capital, right? So I'm not sure that even in the United States, my question is that it seems that there could be some paradox in the United States situations that if you want some powerful or favorable political party to take in power, then you have to elect. But as you said, the election has been hijacked or corrupted. So it seems this is a paradox. Even if maybe Elon Musk has said, he will register a new political party, but it seems it's so difficult. So my second question is how can we if this is in your academic answer, how can you imagine whether in the United States the people can just unite together again and then to try to use political power to regulate AI using some very traditional but I think it's still power and useful tools like antitrust laws or even some speech laws. So this is the second solution. But what if the second solution, maybe people still are quite disappointed with politics, right? It's so dirty, so bad. So maybe we can go to Mars, right? We can. How can you imagine the possibility that people can reinvent the internet? I think this is a very interesting question. Nowadays, people, I think all over the world, people might get a lack of some imaginations of how the future of the human being or how the future of technology should be. So I think I'm not saying that there is no attempts to reinvent the internet, but I found that from to protect the personal data to the blockchain project, I think all of those maybe they have only some very small influences, but cannot reach the point that could change the internet, the original or reinvent the architecture of the internet. So my third question is how can you envision such possibility? Can we maybe not, even if it's not internet, even if it's not the virtual AI or virtual people, but do we? I think the final your final notion is that do we believe in human, right? Do we human themselves believe in human nature to reinvent this using technology to reinvent the relationship between among the humans? So these are my very brief remarks. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Professor Hu. Also very interesting, important questions, I guess. First, why market doesn't do the trick that it's always supposed to do. And second, is there any possibility that you, for example, in America would be pulling the nuclear option of going full Marxist? But anyway, so we will first invite you to give some, brief responses to our discussion, and then we'll open it up to the audience, please.
Yeah, I'm very grateful for both comments. So with respect to the first, this is a really important, profound way to understand my point relative to yours. And I would actually step back from it. Like, I first came to China in 1989. I don't think there's any way to describe or to convey just how dramatically China has changed since 1989. And I mean, just focus on the middle class person in China. 1989 versus today. There's no denying that there's been enormous progress. You can have all sorts of arguments about like whether it should have been faster, whether there should have been different political conditions for it, but you just can't deny that the world is a much better place. And in a world where there is progress, I think you build faith in a government like it's producing that progress, and you have faith that it's not going to be easily dislodged by technology or by anything. Whether you're critical of it or not, there's just a ground truth to the fact that it has succeeded at something. If you compared United States middle-class person in 1989 versus today, they are no better off. They are worse off. Like life of a middle-class person, like relative to everything else that's going on, is just not better. Hasn't improved. And that reality is why there's such deep frustration in the country right now with like our political system and what's going on with our political system. And it's easy to see our political system hijacked by these technologies because there's no there there. There's like no force that you can imagine mature enough to resist it. Right? Again, the story of like the Republicans after January 6th who thought, geez, we're finally done with Donald Trump. It's such a relief. And then it just takes 2 days of overnight polls for them to realize, oops, nope, we're still committed to Donald Trump. I mean, that's just a way of measuring the weakness, the deep weakness that we have inside of our system right now. And I think that accounts for like why the things Chinese people would focus on is like how AI is going to affect business and like what can it do for me and how can it make business better. Like I wish that's what we could worry about, like, because the thing we're worried about is like, oh my gosh, like it's just going to make even worse the flaws we have inside of our democracy right now. And your three questions are really helpful to complement to that. So I think right now, to answer the first question, people experience AI as better than social media, right? Instead of like searching Google for something, you ask AI, and AI gives you answers, and you feel like those answers are credible, and you believe they're credible, partly for the reason that ChatGPT was advertising, that I don't sell my answers, partly because you just think like there's nobody actually out there manipulating it. But look at the dynamic. I don't know if this is visible here, but the dynamic going on about Elon Musk and Grok, right? So Grok gives answers that Elon Musk doesn't like. And what does Elon Musk say? We're going to fix that. What does he mean by fix it? He means go in there and muck about with the brain of Grok to give the answer that Elon Musk wants to give. Well, that's not a platform that's going to produce things you can trust. And again, the point I was making about OpenAI, like the fact that it acknowledges that right now it doesn't sell the truth, but not yet. Like it clearly pointing to the fact that the business model is, they don't know how they're going to make money in the future. Why wouldn't they make money exactly like this? And so I predict that within 10 years, we're going to experience AI just like we experience the internet right now. It's not this source of truth. It's like, oh my gosh, here's Elon Musk's version of truth. Here's like Amazon's version of truth. And so there's no there to guarantee that it doesn't become corrupted in the same way. Then you say, well, can't we imagine government power to defeat the magic? Elon Musk. Oh my God. Elon Musk starting a political party. What does he stand for? What does he stand for? Except I'm rich and I get to do what the hell I want to do. Like I get to take over the American government and muck about with 17 programs that were going to regulate my companies so that they're not regulating my companies anymore. Like what are his ideals? Like there are no ideals to Elon Musk other than what makes Elon Musk more powerful. Words like freedom. Freedom is the most ridiculous word you could possibly utter in America today. There's no dimension of freedom that is real in America today. And the idea that he's advancing a freedom party is just crazy talk. And then even antitrust. Yes, let's have antitrust break up these companies. But if the business model of the company is the same, whether it's 1 or 5, how has that changed the reality of what the infrastructure of the company is producing? So do I think that there's any form of elected democracy that's going to produce a restraint here? I wish I believed that. I really wish I believed that, because I'm an old man and I'm not going to be around long enough to see what I actually think is going to be the answer. because I don't actually think it's elected democracy. It's not some, hero riding on a white horse that's going to come over the hill and save us. It's not going to happen like that. That's very 20th century thinking. Like the idea that there's a, one man or one woman who saves the world. That's not the way it works. It's only going to work if we can find ways around elected democracy. And again, I think the citizen assembly movement is really important. And it's not just it's not just a Western thing. Obviously, China has lots of experiments with democracy that are essentially the same idea, essentially the same structures, as a way to find out what people really want in local districts. I think if we see those things maturing, that's a chance to balance the corruption of the elected process. But again, I don't know if we have time to do that. And then finally, do I think the technology is going to get us to a utopia? Do we believe in us as humans? It might be that we have to say, yes, as humans, we're pretty good. Small groups of us working together, small communities working together, democracy at a small scale, that all works perfectly fine. And maybe we just have to turn off the machine and get back to a place where we can govern ourselves like that, right? The solution to social media is to turn it off, right? Not to live in it. You want to understand what the news is? Pick up a newspaper. Read the newspaper. Not a platform that makes money from convincing you that Martians are invading tomorrow, right? I mean, that's the reality of the solution to social media. And so maybe the answer is not going to be some blockchain hack on blah, blah, blah. The answer is going to be we kind of grow up and learn that these technologies, they were cool when we were kids, but we just have to move beyond them if we're going to ever get back to a humanity that we want to leave our kids.
All right. I think now we still have 10 minutes that we can open up for a couple of audience questions. All right, from here.
Professor Lessig, I'm Yuying, University. I'm a PhD candidate in University Münster in Germany, and thank you for your interesting lecture. And actually, I want to ask because it was a coincidence that in this morning I opened my LinkedIn, and there's a professor from the University of Vienna in Austria. He published a book. Its name is Why AI Undermines Democracy. So I think it's a really big topic now. And my question is that, in China, there are many professors and scholars and students that we pay more attention about Western world, like Germany, Americans, and China also AI, democracy, social, our sister and law. And my question is a little bit broad. What about the global south? Because I think there are very few professors or people pay attention about the global south. And I have never been to global south areas or countries, and I wonder, you must be to this place, I guess. You're very international. So what about your opinion, in the law and AI in global south? If I want to be an innovative professor in the future, if I want to explore these areas, and what's your suggestion that you could give me to? Thank you very much.
Well, in fact, 2 months ago I was in Brasilia, speaking at the the Supreme Court, and we had a workshop on how AI is involved in the judiciary inside of Brazil, and it's astonishing and terrifying because they're basically deploying these models, ChatGPT, inside of the Brazilian judiciary, and they're deciding thousands of cases with these models. And these models have not been trained on Brazil's legal, let alone cultural material. It's all kinds of inverted translation structures. And so the lesson from that is that nobody's going to stop them from adopting these technologies and using them, especially using Llama open source, or quote open source. It's not open source, but quote open source models. And what we need to do is to support the development of less biased, less destructive models in these contexts. And I think what's exciting, especially coming out of the DeepSeek innovation, is that we're beginning to recognize that the model for developing these models is not necessarily the models of the biggest models in the United States. It's not necessarily going to be burn down forests to fuel like a bajillion kilowatts of energy to do these massive models. We might be able to be tuning models in a much more efficient way, and we ought to be encouraging that. There's an extraordinary scholar, Primavera de Filippa, who's developing a way to imagine complementing data structures that, people would develop and keep to themselves that would be used to inform these foundational models, and give answers that are tuned to this data structure. That structure is a very cheap way for anybody to begin to build locally relevant AI infrastructure, and I expect that's what we will see. And so I think we should encourage it. The critical thing to recognize is that AI, as negative as I was, and I think your point originally is really helpful here, as negative as I was about AI, I actually think AI could do enormous good in the world. In the United States, I think it could eliminate 70% of lawyers. And that's a super good thing. Like, I produce lawyers for a living, but I'd love the world where we could get rid of 70% of them, because it would radically lower the cost of law, radically expand the reach of the rule of law. And that would be great. And so we ought to be finding ways to do that, like finding strategies to deploy it so that it can be doing good in all the places that it will do good. We just have to recognize that the market won't necessarily find that automatically on its own. It's going to need to be steered in certain ways, and we need to be bold enough to be willing to do that steering.
I've got time for one final question. Yes, over there.
Hello, Professor Lessig. Thank you very much for your incredible talk today. And you can call me Akila, and my major is geophysics, and I plan to pursue a JD degree in the future. So, as you mentioned, a picture of some starved boys. So I just think of in many regions, such as part of the Africa, human rights and some governance structures are deeply rooted in local cultural contexts that differ from those of many developed countries. So, simply copying the models of AI governance now might lead to adverse consequences. For example, in Kenya, they implement a digital identity system, but it faces numerous privacy and ethical concerns. So, as you mentioned, trust is fragile. So how can we ensure that the development of AI governance models respects these local nuance and integrates global ethics standards without imposing a one-size-fits-all solution? And in this regard, how important do you think it is to have professionals who are not only skilled in coding, but also deeply knowledgeable in local ethics and values? Yeah,
it's a great question. I think that the only strategy that would achieve what you're seeking, and I think what you're seeking we have to work towards, is to leverage the incredible knowledge that exists around the world to help these countries deploy technology in a way that doesn't defeat their local objectives. And, we have infrastructure to help do that right now. So as these countries like Brazil begins to adopt AI in court systems, there's plenty of opportunity for people, even remotely, to be advising about how to deploy it in a way that doesn't get hijacked by the implicit biases that get built into OpenAI's model as they try to deploy it. And that we ought to be constantly making them aware that there are knobs on the dashboard that they can be adjusting to make sure that it's achieving the local objective without being defeated by these one-size-fits-all solutions. And I kind of think it's like, professional engineers are public-spirited sorts of people. They go into the business of engineering, many of them, because they think that they'll do good in the world. Well, here's a chance for them to do good in the world. Like, take their knowledge and spread it in a way that helps these diverse cultures use AI in a way that maintains their diversity and doesn't just make them another cog in a system which doesn't care at all about that difference. But I think it's an important perspective to push in exactly that way. Thank you.
All right, great. So I'm afraid to announce that we are already running out of our time. But I hope that this is actually a very memorable morning for all of you, for all of us here, to listen to your presentation, but also have this really engaging and great, conversation. I mean, engagement business model isn't good, but, engaging conversation among human beings are always invaluable. With that, thank you so much, Professor Lessig, for being here with us. And we really hope that, you might be able to come back to, to share your time with us again, not very, very far in the future. Also, thank you very much, everybody, for participating. We'll now conclude this session. Thanks.